Chapter 25. The Violin Concerto. March 13th, 1845. In the crowded Gavant house, Niels Gade counted the orchestra in. My violin entered soon after, singing the flowing motif that had been fermenting in Felix's mind 6 years prior, now being poured out as if it were fine wine, sweet and extravagant to the taste, but a mature drink only enjoyed at the most special occasions. The audience listened as if they were tasting every tone. Each instrument had its own distinct hint of flavor. I used my efforts appropriately to be sure every ear captured my instrument. The entirety of the work revolved around the auditorium with capital acoustics. The orchestra's accompaniment complemented the violin with skill. As my bowing scalloped the sound upward, the orchestra followed, leading to the climax of the phrase where the orchestra blared out. I ran my fingers to play the strong ascending octaves. The orchestra gave another blaring flare. I bowed a second run of broken octaves that led the work into an interlude. Though I stood, keeping my stance, I glanced at the people seated towards the front. They were in a state of bliss, surrounded by the mystique of the piece that had come together through careful craftsmanship. Each musician had pleasure in taking part in the concerto. The interlude gave them a chance to exercise their skill as a whole. I held my violin to my chin again, ready for my next entry so as not to be late. This work, in its premiere, was deemed not to be forlorn in the generations to come. Back in the home in Soden, Felix was stuck in bed, feeling like death. His ill state wasn't the main factor, but it was because he longed so terribly to be conducting the premiere of his violin concerto. He had worked so hard to get it to that point, and he couldn't fathom the fact that he missed it. To top it off, the doctor now declared him too unwell to leave bed. He didn't believe the man's words until fever finally began consuming him. It sent a weakness over his body, making it not matter whether he wanted to leave bed or not. He felt as if a weight were on his chest, and the contents of his stomach felt a muddle, ready to spill out of his mouth. Drips of sweat drizzled off his forehead. Johann helped in any way he could by fetching tea and herbs. The doctor feared the fever to be dangerous, so mixed various medicines that he determined were far more effective than mere plants. It was in question whether the tinctures truly worked or not. Most doctors, especially older ones, mixed things through trial and error, causing repercussions. To Felix's thanks, none of the sour medications hurt him, but they rather made him drowsy on top of the ill fatigue. After taking a dose of a tincture the doctor found effective, Felix sank into bed. The sweating slowed, and a real restful slumber commenced. Johann gave sighs of relief. Thank goodness something worked. Yeah, hopefully he sleeps the rest of the night. It will give a good chance for the fever to lift. The doctor penned down his medicinal recipe. Meanwhile, dreams were flourishing in Felix's mind. He felt a warming happiness, riding his old horse through a blossoming flower field, surrounded by a mystical forest. The horse pranced about the open land before stopping to graze. Felix dismantled the equine to smell the pink wild roses. He then fell back into a bed of soft, lush grass as the twilight enticed fireflies to hover about. Felix lived up the moment in which sprung a lullaby of melody into his head. He hummed it unconsciously outside of the dream world, only to realize it was a segment of his precious violin concerto. The doctor adjusted his spectacles whilst listening to Felix chirp and whistle various melodies. There was too much talent in the hums to deem it mad behavior. The doctor rather enjoyed the singing and listened with pleasure. He asked Johann, "Does he hum often?" "Yeah, when composing, of course, but it is especially tuneful when he is lullabying the children to sleep." Johann smiled at Felix's peaceful state. Yet, in a sudden flash, Felix woke in utter restlessness, trying to get up. The worry over his concerto became stronger than the medication. The doctor instantly stood from his seat and tried to calm him. "You cannot leave bed. You are in a feverish state." "But the concert." Felix became delirious. "I need to be there." He stirred in a sweat. Johann grabbed a handkerchief and wiped the pouring sweat from Felix's face. The doctor explained while holding him down. "The fever is worsening and causing a panic." "I will fetch water." Johann left the room. "I don't want water. I need to be at the concert house." Felix's tone had desperation. He then turned to the doctor in fury. This is your fault. I could have left. You're being completely unreasonable. The doctor grabbed his arms as Felix tried to shove him away. Let go of me. Felix began to scream. The poor fellow shivered as if he were cold to the bones. On the other hand, his forehead was burning. When Johann returned with a pail of water, he set it on the floor. He then dampened a rag and placed it on Felix's head to cool him down. The doctor told the servant, "Stay beside him while I get him medicine." Of course, Johann attempted to calm Felix by giving him water. He drank much as his dry mouth begged for hydration. It also seemed to lift his delirious state. The doctor came back after mixing a tincture together. Felix sighed upon seeing the vial of syrup. "Is that going to make me groggy as everything else you've given me?" "This will make you sleep fully, I am sure of it." He gave Felix a hearty spoonful. The horrid taste of the thick, sticky syrup took much effort to manage down his throat. After a few minutes, Felix blinked heavily, becoming too exhausted to move. The slumber that came over him appeared deep. The doctor gave a sigh of relief. That at least calmed his nerves. He grabbed a stethoscope to check Felix's pulse. When listening to him, his breathing was slow, but the beats of his heart were ramping. Something more than the fever was firing his nerves. Felix, inside, was fully awake with the anxiety of the concert lingering within him. His main asset of worry was of the cadenza in the first movement. He hoped it would go as written, with no impromptu moves. The concert at the Gewandhaus continued with the orchestra slowing towards the cadenza. In reality, it was my decision whether to improvise or not. Felix was not present to say otherwise, and audiences loved my personal input in compositions. A daring choice it was, with only mere moments to decide. When the flail of my bowings drove the music on, I braced myself as the accompaniment came to an utter echo of silence. Without any hesitation, I gracefully embarked on the arpeggios and broken chords. My fingers followed what dear Felix had written. Each note he had penned was worth the while for this performance. He had specifically made it to correlate with the skill of my bowing hand. Everyone's attention pertained to nothing but my old violin. The dimmed lights of the auditorium still glowed a twinkle, looking like stars from the stage. It was an unforgettable, magical sense. The air of the stage felt like a vent of space, cool in temperature with a sense of nothingness, while all else sat in silence to watch me caress my instrument. My hard sweat spewed in the midst of the workout of playing a perfect rendition. The deed had been done. I played to Felix's wishes. After the rest of the piece, the premiere was received with immense success. I gave my bow, then shook Gade's hand, only to find myself skipping out of the concert house in pure joy. At my home, I straightway changed from my concert attire to something travel-worthy and packed a bag or so. Sophie came into the bedroom as I finished gathering my things. She asked, "How was the concert?" "It went just as imagined. I'm taking a trip to Frankfurt, as I must visit Felix. It will give him closure if I tell him how well it went." "Travel safe." Sophie pecked my forehead in wifely tenderness. I gave my goodbyes to my children, then set off by coach in the darkened night. The carriage trudged for a day and a half before reaching the quiet wood home in Soden near Frankfurt. It was the mid-afternoon, and Felix's children were running about in the garden. When they saw me, they rushed my way. "Hello, Herr David," young Karl exclaimed. The others jumped happily. I greeted, then continued to the house. Cecil greeted me warmly, but her eyes were full of trouble. She explained, "Felix has had a terrible case of the measles. The doctor said his fever should lift, but it seems to only stay steady." "May I see him?" I asked. "It is best you speak to him, as he is overwhelmed about the concert." She guided me to the bedroom. I entered to see a doctor sitting in a corner chair, giving a sigh of relief. I turned to see Felix in bed, snoring softly, dreaming and humming. I instantly caught that it was the melody of his concerto. The doctor explained, keeping his voice low. "He has been humming that melody all evening. I wish I had my own lullabies to myself. He is probably having nightmares over the concerto, wondering if I played it right," I chuckled. As soon as sensing my presence, Felix shot up in his usual way of excitement. The doctor face-palmed as Felix spoke frantically. "Ferdinand, did the concert go well? Did you play the cadenza as I intended? Did the audience like it? Who conducted? I wish ever so to be." "Felix," I gave a stern tone of voice, "I will tell you everything once you calm down." All right, he patted the edge of the bed, wanting me to sit by him. I went ahead and sat, but still distanced enough not to catch any illness. So how did it go? Felix changed his manners altogether to be calm and polite. I smiled. It was the best concerto I have ever played. Really? The excitement flared again. The doctor scolded. Be calm, or I'll give you another dose of medicine before you finish the conversation. Sorry, Felix glared at the physician in annoyance. He turned to me, commenting, all he does is stuff me full of tinctures. That's it, the doctor stated. I'm sick of the attitude. I'm going to try something new, something that will work in the snap of the fingers. My colleague from Dublin came up with the solution last year. Do I want to know? Felix gave a puff of exasperation. I watched the doctor stuff the medicine into something that didn't look altogether appealing, a syringe. Felix's eyes widened in nervousness. The doctor took a tight hold of Felix's arm, rolling up his sleeve. The ruddy speckled rash from the illness appeared quite terrible. Felix questioned as the doctor seemed to rather fumble with the dreadful thing. Do you even know what you're doing? I watched my colleague use these. He didn't hesitate to stick his arm. Felix jumped and spewed his opinion. Your colleague's invention sucks. Shut up, you'll be asleep in the next minute. The doctor pushed on the plunger to force the medicine in. Felix fell in a state of drowsiness before the full dose of the tincture was injected. He fought hard to keep awake. I knew it was my company he wanted, so wrapped up our conversation by assuring, you will be there for the next performance of the concerto. I promise you, you have my word. If this illness would not consume me, Felix flopped back onto his pillow in a cold sweat. A week or so later, Cecil sat on the sofa in the parlor to catch up on knitting. Felix strode in, wearing his lounging robe and slippers. He had a steeping cup of lemon ginger tea. Cecil gave a smile of thankfulness when he sat beside her. He looked tired from indisposition, but he had healed from the fever. Is the lemon tea helping with the cough? Johann said it was the best remedy. Cecil scooted closer to her husband. Yeah, it's helping. It's better than all of those disgusting syrups and dreadful shots the doctor gave me. Felix then sipped the hot liquid in silence. The fireplace crackled, warming the room. Cecil could sense his thoughts. Is something on your mind? I've been thinking about our home here lately. Although I do miss Leipzig, we are so peaceful in the Frankfurt countryside. If the future allows, we should build ourselves a home to our liking. It could be anything we want, a cottage or a wooden house. We would always have a garden, with fresh strawberries and sparkling water from the finest spring. Felix, darling, Cecil interrupted. We are happy visiting here, but Leipzig is where we prosper. In all honesty, do you want to live this close to my mother? Good point, never mind. Felix left the sofa and turned to the writing desk to catch up on letters. He penned things here and there, but nothing exciting. Felix, darling, Cecil crept up behind him, holding him at the shoulders. Felix grabbed her hand, soaking up the affection. Yeah, honey, are you by chance going to write to Chopin any time soon? I haven't a reason. Why? Well, you know how I adore his music. I wondered if he could send something for you to play me. I'd be pleased to hear something new from him. I can ask. I hear that he spends most of his time writing these days. He doesn't perform publicly as he used to. Merci, Cecil kissed her husband on the neck. Felix grabbed a blank page and began his wife's request. My dear Chopin, this letter comes to you to ask a favor. Would you, out of friendship, write a few bars of music, signed your name, at the bottom to show you wrote them for my wife Cecil, and send them to me? Whenever I wish to give my wife a great pleasure, I have to play to her, and her favorite works are those you have written. Your friend, Felix. A week or so later, the post brought a few letters. The first one contained the most exciting news as Johann dished out supper. Klingmann was engaged and soon to be married. The circumstances had been a long time pet wish to Felix. Upon reading the news, he got up from his dining chair and danced about the room for a full 5 minutes. Cecil raised a brow. Are you out of your senses? 9. I've waited so long for this moment. Klingmann is getting married. He continued his happy dance. The children loved their father's energy, and the 3 eldest joined by dancing around him. Cecil casually asked, as Felix was overcrowded by his children, when should we plan our next child? Next child? I think we have our hands plenty full right now. He sat back at the table to eat the stew before it chilled. The children followed. Cecil gave a sigh, then pestered him by muttering, Bach had 20 children. That seems a bit excessive. Felix gave an eye roll. Little Carl spoke up. Can we get another sister so Marie has a friend? Maybe one more, Felix gave in. Cecil in an instant stood from the table in delight. She handed Felix Jr. to Johann, then went to her husband, giving him a kiss on the cheek. I shall get the bed ready for tonight. Wait, Felix was rather not expecting that. Cecil hurried off. Felix shrugged and continued eating. He opened the other received letter containing music. It was from Chopin. Dear Felix, just try hard to imagine, my dear friend, that I am writing by return of post. If please present it from me to Mrs. Mendelssohn. Frederick Chopin. Felix hid the enclosed music when Cecil returned. She grabbed her satchel. I'm going to town to get more fabric. Marie needs a new dress. Take your time, honey, Felix inquired as she left. He finished up his dinner, then went to the piano to try the new piece. It was a short mazurka in A-flat major, with Chopin's signature at the bottom. Cecil obviously wanted a night of quality time, so he made preparations by practicing it beautifully before her return. When the latter part of the evening came, the children were ordered to bed. Johann took care of any complaints, as Felix had business to tend to. He returned to the piano, waiting for his wife. A half-hour later, Cecil came home with her needed fabrics. The minute she entered, her heart swooned as the piano echoed a new piece of music. She knew it to be Chopin's composition by the flow of it. In haste, she put her purchases away, then spruced up her hair before entering the living room. There she found Felix sitting with a posture of romance at the keys. The fireplace illuminated the room. Cecil sat next to him, watching his hands delicately press each note with purpose. When the piece finished, Cecil kissed her husband. She stated between pressing lips, Where are the children? Put to bed, Felix assured. Excellent. Cecil maneuvered her hands to his hips. He in turn held her gracious shoulders to shower her neck with passionate kisses. Each press of his sweet lips felt as a brushing of rose petals. When their session became too in-depth for the piano bench, they moved to the sofa. There, Felix romantically moved aside the shoulder sleeves of Cecil's dress to get a bare hold on the woman's radiant arms. Her light skin felt of fine silk, smooth to the touch. He breathed in her floral perfume, letting the fresh scent fill his nose. With his gesture, Cecil moved her hold to Felix's waist. She then unbuttoned his waistcoat and undershirt. Felix's heart pounded once her vibrant hands grasped his torso, causing him to lay back as if falling into a bed of spring flowers. In his state of being paralyzed from love, Cecil leaned over him to give her touches. She ran her hands along the slight curve of his waist. Felix's stature was petite for a man, but his figure had a luscious shape. From regular exercise, his tummy was fit, but after being full of dinner and wine, it was lush and soft like a bundle of violets. Completing his body's essence of cuteness was a little belly button, ever so rounded and delicate. Felix gave way to giggles and chirps of melody as he felt Cecil's soft touches slowly seep into it, like a hummingbird gently tasting a succulent blossom. In an attempt to keep a romantic stature, Felix caressed Cecil's beautiful hips. The dress she wore articulated her small curvy body, with a silhouette of utmost elegance to Felix's liking. He moved his hands to her neck and chin, admiring her gorgeous face. Her blue eyes pierced his soul. Cecil smiled at the various tunes the spark of her hand caused Felix to bellow and whinny. Yet after a few more moments of savoring his music, she sat up. Felix begged her, Bitte, ich brauche mehr Küsse. He tugged at her dress to entice her back. All right, Cecil leaned over him. Unable to help herself, she kissed his neck and moved each pressing smooch towards his ear to whisper, It's time for bed. Must we leave our moment here? Felix breathed onto her shoulder. Come to bed. Her tone had indication. He fluttered, feeling her touches once more frolic about his belly. She was then quick to pull him from the sofa, as if stealing him away. He followed beside her to the bedroom, where the session continued its course. After the full season of spring and summer, the latter part of 1845 brought the busy season of October at the Gewandhaus. Each week contained a plethora of concerts. The successful days were full of energy, while other moments begged for rest. One concert took the utmost work to prepare, Felix's Violin Concerto. It had not seen the stage since its premiere. The composer inquired that he conduct the second showing, but it took time to schedule the concert, as other engagements constantly booked out the concert house. In thankfulness, a perfect day happened to be free in October, and all of Leipzig packed the Gewandhaus. The beat of the timpani bellowed, flares of the trumpets took part in a ravishing fanfare. My violin chirped in joy. Felix found himself at the conducting desk with utmost excitement in finally getting to see his concerto performed. He had waited ever so patiently to have the concert organized. I, of course, felt inclined to take up as the soloist. Though Felix's conducting was commonly subtle, he was moving about with much excitement at the joyful last movement of the work. He was in pure happiness at the moment in time, music-wise and life-wise. The stretch of the year caused many great things to commence. Felix moved his family back to Leipzig, where they found a modest apartment on Kornerstrasse. Niles Gade's abode happened to be only a few paces away, making Felix feel even closer to his friends. Along with moving, Felix returned to the duties at the Gewandhaus. Hiller wanted to move on, so allowed Felix to reacquire the position as director. In regards to family life, Cecil was heavy in pregnancy, due in only a few months' time. She felt most comfortable in the lavish parlor of the new apartment. Felix, meanwhile, worked away in his office, composing music and writing letters. He had received exciting news from Ignaz, who was making official arrangements to move his family to Leipzig, where he would devote his time as head of the conservatorium. Felix straightway wrote about the differences between London and Leipzig, giving a rough outcome on expenses. Before giving a solid cost amount, Felix set his pen down. He left his office to find Cecil. "Are you by chance organizing the account books today?" "Yes, in fact, I shall do that now." She set her knitting aside and grabbed the books. Felix followed her to the dining table. Together they sorted out their costs per annum. He studied the bills carefully to get the real sum of a cheerful home. A lot went into the costs, but each factor had importance. After consulting Cecil, Felix returned to the writing desk and penned. "The price of a flat consisting of 7 or 8 rooms, with kitchen and appurtenances, varies from $300 to $350. Servants would cost $110 per annum, depending on what is required. Male servants are not as common, as they cost $3 to $12 a month. A good cook gets $40 a year. A housemaid $32. If you add a lady's maid to sew and make dresses, you would reach the mentioned figure. Adding a manservant would increase costs, but most don't need one. Wood is an important expense for the kitchen stove, and heating costs $150 to $200 for a family of 5 with servants. Rates and taxes are next to nothing. $8 to $10 a year cover it all. To help you get a better idea of costs, a thaler is equal to 3 shillings or 75 cents. In other words, your family would live comfortably with $1,800 to $2,000. Yours, Felix." By December, Cecil had her 5th child, Elizabeth. Felix complied with his wife's wishes of naming the baby after the newborn's grandmother. He rather used the nickname of Lily. With a growing family, Felix found his hands full, trying to give attention to each child. Adding to the mayhem, concerts at the Gewandhaus only became busier. The next performance involved a growing name in the singing world. A Swedish woman by the name of Jenny Lind was sweeping concert halls with her soprano voice. In haste, the board of directors at the Gewandhaus invited her to perform. On the day of her coming, word spread like wildfire through Leipzig. Rehearsals took up the hours prior to the evening's concert. While Jenny was being introduced to the musicians by her manager, all of the men swooned over the young maiden's beauty. All but I. I thought her to be pretty, of course, but I had a wife. There was nothing to be overdrawn to. Felix had a warm smile towards the girl, in much manner as I. Yet that changed when she began to sing. As soon as Felix heard the sheer power of her sparkling voice, it caused his heart to feel as if it were growing wings. The pulses of love hurt as it was treacherous. He had felt the same way when first laying eyes upon Cecil. The aches of a torn heart hindered his conducting, and the musicians slowly began to fall out of time. I looked up from my music to find Felix in a daze of infatuation. Jenny kept singing, but struggled as the orchestra became a muddle. I seemed to be the only conscious man in the moment, so took charge. Manner. Everyone halted and turned to me. I continued, "Shouldn't we be playing in time for Miss Lind?" "Ah, yeah, of course." Felix shook himself awake. "From the top." The rest of rehearsals went to satisfaction. Jenny smiled at me, feeling more confident. I blushed inside a tad, but still wasn't fazed. Felix's desire of the soprano only grew with each note of her angel of a voice. After rehearsing the hours away, the concert house hosted a packed audience. It was an obedient crowd that wanted to savor every note of Jenny Lind. Felix conducted as if you're floating on clouds. He watched only her, causing me to articulate my gestures more so, to help guide the other musicians. His forming affections for the soprano really began to irritate me. After the performance, Lind managed to make her exit after much applause and roar. It took a great deal of time for the crowd to silence. Felix was soon to follow behind her, but I packed my violin in haste and halted him. "Herr Sleinitz is having a gathering at his home. His wife is making cake. I'll join, but I must go speak with Miss Lind." He wandered off. I followed him down a corridor to the dressing room that Jenny took up. He knocked and Lind allowed him to enter. Meanwhile, I waited outside, patiently. Inside the dressing room, Felix sat at a chair, visiting with Jenny as she did her hair at the vanity. He was in a trance with his heart skipping. He couldn't be overly anxious towards her. She seemed to enjoy Felix's company, but not in the same air. "I had much enjoyment here," Jenny commented. "I shall have to return." "Please do. This had to be the best concert I've ever conducted," Felix chimed with a smile. Jenny saw his expression through the mirror. She sensed his feelings in the moment, so finished up her hair and turned to him. Felix felt butterflies attack him as her eyes gazed at him. "Felix," her tone had a serious nature. Felix shook from his daydream and noticed her posture was not of love. She continued speaking. "I know why you wanted to come and speak with me. It is the case with every gentleman. You will help me with my career, so I intend to keep our relationship on the basis of that." She stood. Felix stood as well, now in a disheartened state. Jenny sighed at seeing him so sad, but there was a fact to the matter. She grabbed her cloak to leave. Before putting it on, Felix offered, "Please, let me help you with that. I can at least be a well-mannered gentleman." "All right." She handed him her cloak. Felix made the moment slow by taking his time to place it on her. Jenny felt a small spark in her heart as his hand brushed her shoulder. She turned around to face him, causing Felix to hold her at the arms. His feelings of love went all over as she gave an unexpected kiss to the side of his neck. She whispered in his ear, "Write to me." With that, she left for the evening. When Lind exited the dressing room, I bowed politely. Felix followed behind her, putting on his top hat, ready to leave. He appeared to be the utmost chipper. I interrogated as we went down the corridor. "What took you so long? I thought you were only giving a few praises." "I did." Felix skipped in his step. I eyed him in suspicion. He gave a confused expression as I took him at the shoulders and stopped him in the hall. I spoke seriously. "Felix, I know there was something more." "What do you mean?" Felix kept an innocent tone as he tried to keep his neck covered by his cravat. I sighed and moved the cravat to see a kiss mark on his neck. Felix gulped as I warned in all scolding nature. "Felix, I do not know your intent with Jenny, but I sure hope that you remember that Cecil and your children love you. You should never risk losing that." "I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me," Felix apologized. We continued out of the concert house and found a carriage to Sleinitz home. The whole time at the little get-together, Felix appeared out of place. He spoke none while sitting in the parlor and didn't seem to care about Frau Constanze Sleinetz's homemade cake. I thought his demeanor to be rude, so handed him a slice of cake. "Felix, Frau Sleinitz would be happy if you ate some of her cake." "I'm not hungry," Felix stated, as if I had disrupted something. I knew he was thinking about Jenny, so forced him to take the cake while whispering, "Get your act together and stop thinking about Miss Lind." "Fine," Felix glared at me. It wasn't like him to give such expressions. I turned from him and continued enjoying the gathering. Felix ate the cake, but as soon as the late hour struck, he left in eagerness. Upon entering his apartment, Felix went straight to his office, feeling the need to conceal himself. He sat at his desk, Contemplating love altogether. Picking up a fresh leaf of paper, Felix wrote as to get rid of his deceitful feelings. He filled the page with lines of his underlying love wishes. After signing it, he addressed the note to Jenny Lind.